Can I just ask, are we being recorded, Pav?
You're welcome to be recorded. I'm not recording.
Just started because I'd love to watch it back.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, I thought that.
Very good to whoever recorded. Okay, so let's start with the ingredients. Normally I'd have an assistant with me, but I've had a cold, so trying not to spread my germs with anybody else. So let's start with the ingredients. So for the first dish, which is the red kidney beans, ordinarily I would be using real kidney beans soaked overnight, 5 to 6 hours, just because I think they're once they're soaked, they're easier to digest than the tin stuff. But today, because I'm short of time, I've literally bought, I've taken out some chopped kidney beans from a tin, and I've put 2.5 tins in there. I've got some fresh tomatoes, and what I've done is I've got some green chilies, and we'll talk through these in a moment. I've got an onion. I have to admit, I've cheated on the onions. I've already chopped them and I've already softened them, so they're already there. But it is, I promise you, real onions that we've used. I've got salt and pepper, and I've got garlic and ginger. Now, this won't look like the garlic and ginger that you know ordinarily, and that's partly because I have we chop them in advance and we freeze them, and then we just pull them out and we put them in ice cubes trays, and then when we're ready, we take them out. And just use them one at a time. I also have with me a selection of herbs and spices, rather, sorry. I've got with me turmeric today. This is the yellow stuff. And it's the king of, it's really good if you've got cancer, anti-cancer. I've got chili powder, we've got coriander, dried coriander, I've got salt, I've got cumin seeds. I will also have cumin powder. But in essence, that's as simple as the ingredients list goes today for the main course.
It's a bit blurred.
Oh, is it? Let me just take the background thing off. That might help. Apologies. Okay, that should hopefully be better now. So just one last look at here. So you've got the spices here, the garlic and ginger there, onion, salt and pepper, the red kidney beans, tomatoes, and the green chilies, and there will be fresh coriander, which I've got to pull out the fridge, that we'll use to garnish. Now, on the other side, we've got, for the dessert, we're doing this China grass. Now, does anyone know what China grass looks like? Has anyone seen China grass? Anyone ever cooked with China grass?
No.
Okay, so in essence, I mean, it is a seaweed, so it's vegetarian, and this is a vegetarian dish that we're cooking today. On both, in fact, on vegetarians. And this is what China grass looks like. It's, I don't know if you can see that terribly well, but it's literally sort of almost translucent grass that's been dried. And what it is, it's seaweed that's just been desiccated, dried, and it has a very natural gelatinous, almost like gelatine effect. So it creates a jelly, if you like. So we're creating a dairy-based jelly sort of dish today with China grass. And with that, we'll use some vanilla essence. Now you can use something called Karo water, which is rose water as well. I'm using pistachios for garnish. I'll chop those later. But pistachios, you can put just anything you want on top. And we've got some sugar, and we've got water, and we've got milk. And that will be the dessert. I'm going to mix. I'm going to jump between the two different dishes just because they require cooking at different paces. I'm probably going to start with the dessert first because it needs some time to set before you can consume that. So let's make a start. I'll bring my iPad back to the top here. I am full of a cold as well, so you have to excuse me if I don't feel particularly great, but I'm only doing this because I promised I would, and well, there we go, I promised I would. So, okay, so to start with, you need a pan. In this, we're going to add some water. And then what we're going to do, let me just see if I can get this closer so you can have more of a look. What we're going to do, I'm going to get a handful of the China grass, and I'm literally just going to break it, try and break it. It is really dry, and I'm going to pop it into the pan. Literally, that's all I'm going to do. Just popping it into the. Sorry. I hope that's okay. I'm literally just popping it into the pan, shaking it in, and that's all we're going to do. And I'm going to put this on a very low heat, very, very low heat. It's important to just let it melt as naturally as possible on a very low heat. You don't want to overheat it because it will start going hard. So it has to be done on a very, very low heat. And we're going to let that just dissolve in there. I'll not use all of the China grass just because I won't have a pan big enough. Let me pull the spatula out. I'll just give that a little bit of stir, just drop it in. Okay, so we're here because it's LGBT History Month, and one of the things that we wanted to talk about was the way in which food sometimes evokes or is a metaphor for liberation struggles and movements. And in many ways, some of the dishes that we're talking about today, in particular, I chose the red kidney beans in particular because it had a strong connection to southern United States, and I wanted to just use that as an example, really, of how food has been a language or an expression of liberation in communities where liberation hasn't always been a part of their historic narrative-oriented contemporary narrative. And in the southern states of the United States, of course, you'll remember those were home of slavery in particular. And the oppression wasn't just of people of color, of African Caribbean heritage people. There was also a lot of oppression of sexualized minorities. And in particular, there's a lot of, I think, whilst gay men have done really well, relatively speaking, in terms of raising their profile and so forth, what's been really interesting is watching the experience of lesbian women and the histories of lesbian women in literature and contemporary parlance has almost been has been invisibilized. And in some ways, the connection to food and women's history and the invisibilizing of women or minoritizing of women is connected to also historic roles for women in society. And often women were kept indoors in homes and in kitchens, and there was a notion of you were there to breed children, raise children, and also to cook and keep the home. And there was a sort of hidden history there. So women were isolated already. So food and cooking became a very important connection between women, particularly women who were lesbian, to be able to connect with other women and create communities that were often forbidden. And so, we've talked a lot about in literature, you'll know things like forbidden fruits and so forth. These are quite common narratives that are used, and often women's identities and women's bodies were when sexualized, were often described in edible terms, if you like. And so it was really interesting to see in the southern states, the United States, how lesbian women in particular really embraced food. So even things like, whether you dipped your cookie in chocolate or whatever, all those things had sexual connotation to them. And so it almost became an undercurrent. So it's an unspoken or a spoken language, and everything had a double entendre, but it was not filthy double entendres. It was, it was coded language, and people learned to live a codified life because that was what was expected. It was, of course, much worse for if you were African American heritage, but even for white LGBT people, it was really, really bad and really difficult. And of course, that's reflected not just in the United States. That was the same story in the UK and in many parts of Western Europe and indeed parts of Africa and Asia and Latin America too. So there's a very common history, shared experience of people. Now, what was happening here, sorry, while I was speaking, is the gelatinous, the China grass is starting to melt. It's starting to dissolve. And I'm keeping it again, still keeping it on a very low heat. So just let me bring that over. I don't know if you can see that. So it's starting to melt, it's starting to bubble away. And what we're doing is we're just waiting for it to completely dissolve. And then we'll move on to the next stage, which is adding some sugar and some milk. What I'm going to do, what time is it? 12:15. This is why it was such a good idea to peel the onions and saute the onions before I even got to see you, because then I'm well ahead of the game. What I'm going to start doing is I'm just going to start putting on the main course. I would say we've run out of gas, but that's not true. I washed the rings, and there we are. So what we're going to do now, I've just put the large pan on. In this, I've put a little bit of oil already. You can see I've had the onions in there, but I've taken the onions out now. I'm going to add some cumin seeds, and we're going to fry those cumin seeds. Why? Because cumin is a beautiful, really aromatic spice, but it needs to pop. The flavour needs to come out. You don't want to overcook it. You just want to keep it. It would help if I put the oven on. Put the gas on. There we are. You don't need to overcook it, but you do need to heat the oil and then let it pop. This is where you can see I'm a disaster at multitasking, but there we go. So the China grass is now dissolved, which is great. I'll just leave that there a moment. The onion and the oil is in the pan. I'm going to pop some of these cumin seeds. Has anyone cooked with cumin before?
Yeah.
Okay, this one. So that's what cumin seeds look like. They're like this. I don't know if you see that. I'm just going to pop a handful of those into my pan, and I'm going to let them cook in the hot oil, but enough to let them boil. Enough to hear them pop. Because when they start popping, that's when the aroma starts kicking out, and that's all you need. This is more effective when I've got two people helping me, but that's the way it is today, I'm afraid. Any questions so far from anyone? You're being very quiet. Can
you recap what the dishes are that you're making?
Yes, I can do. Okay, so we're doing two dishes today. The first one is a red kidney bean curry, and it's based on a southern United States recipe. And it's often served with rice and beans. And that recipe is basically red kidney beans, onions, tomatoes, garlic and ginger, green chili, salt and pepper. It's red pepper, dry powder. It's haldi, which is turmeric. It's dried coriander. It's salt, and the cumin seeds that we've already just popped in the pan. You can literally see. I mean, I've not done too much, but so I can get an aroma, which is great. And so I've taken it off the heat. I've literally just fried it for barely a minute. It's enough, and you don't want to burn the cumin seeds, because if you burn the cumin seeds, then it creates a really bitter, charred flavour, and you don't want that. Into that, I'm just going to, here's the onions that I fried earlier on. I'm just going to add the onions into here. That's quite a lot of onion in here, partly because I'm making more than I need to, because I'm going to deliver some to a friend who's also poorly. So we'll be ill together. And that's been sat in I've used vegetable oil. You can use any oil you want. I'm just going to mix that in. You'll see the China grass is bubbling away. So what I'm going to do there is I'm going to get some sugar, and I'm literally going to pour the sugar in.
Pav?
Yes.
Where can you get the China grass from?
So the China grass you can buy from any good Asian store or Chinese or Asian store. That's normally where I find them. China grass is actually it's also known as agar, A-G-A-R. Now you get it in powder form, or you can get it in. I mean, I'll show you where I buy it.
I was thinking I've not seen it. Obviously,
I literally buy it in strips like this.
Yeah, okay.
So it's dried, and so it's called agar, A-G-A-R. That's a Malay word, and of course the Chinese connection there is, of course, a lot of Malaysians from the Malay Peninsula come from China, so that's the connection there. So what I've done is I put sugar into the China grass mix, and let that dissolve, and again on a very low heat. I'll turn that up to a slightly medium level heat in a short while, just before I put the milk in. I put the onions into the cumin seed mix there, and I put that on the heat. I don't know if everyone sees that. And then in a short while, I'm going to start adding the spices. This is a quite strong tomato-based piece, just because that's what gives it the gravy. That's what gives it the gravy sort of effect. I'm just going to add now to here. So I've added about a cupful, what I would call a cupful of sugar, which is about 150 grams. I'm then going to add about 2 cups worth of milk. into, so you can't see because I can see, you can't. You just bring the camera over. You can start seeing that the China grass, the agar is starting to boil again. It's dissolved, so the sugar's nicely dissolved. I'm just going to add to that 2 cups of milk. 2 cups is about half a litre, just to get that going, and it'll just become a cloudy milk mixture. Some people put this through a sieve. I'm slightly less fussy about these things. I don't mind a few lumps and bumps in my puddings, to be honest. And so, okay.
Now, what's the dessert you're making?
I'm sorry, you have to say that louder.
What's the dessert you're making?
So the dessert is called China grass. It's like a jelly, milk jelly, dairy jelly. Okay. But it's vegetarian. And you can replace the dairy milk with non-dairy milk if you so wish. And the recipe for that, for the dessert, the China grass dessert, is basically China grass, as I showed you. It's vanilla essence, 2 drops of vanilla essence. It's a handful of pistachio nuts. It's a cupful of sugar, and it's 2 cups of milk and 2 cups of water. And what we do is we put the water in the pan. We add the China grass to it. That's what we've done already. We've let that dissolve on a very low heat to make sure it doesn't burn. We've dissolved it at a low temperature. Once it's dissolved, we've added the sugar. We let the sugar dissolve, and then we add the milk, 2 cups of milk, and then we let that just on a lowish heat. I'm moving that to medium level heat now, just letting that boil away. Do
you call it another name in your language? In Punjabi or Urdu?
Well, you know, it's funny because it was I was always raised calling it China grass, which literally means China grass. That's always the name that we've known it by. I've known it by as a kid, and it's dead easy to make, of course, which is why it's on. With both these dishes, the cake can be made within an hour. I'm just going to bring you over and show you how we're doing with it.
Just I've never heard. I've been in the community a long time, never heard of it. That's really strange.
Okay. It's very popular across the, as I say. I mean, obviously, it's in Japan. It's in the Singaporean Peninsula. I'm bringing this tray of the main dish sort of ingredients over. So what we're going to start doing now into the main dish. I wish I could bring the camera over so you can see it. I'm hoping that will work. So what I'm going to do into this mix, which is the onion and the cumin seeds and the oil. Then I'm going to add some red chili powder. I'm really bad at measuring. I literally just plop in what I think I need, and I'm going to do 2 teaspoons, if you like, of cumin powder. So I've got red chili powder. I've got cumin powder. I'm going to pop in some coriander, 2 spoons of that. I'm going to do a spoon and a half or so of salt. That should be enough. And I'll just show you that from here. And what that starts doing, the key about spices, that they really need to be cooked. They're not there for food coloring. They really are there to be cooked and to give flavor. And I always describe it as chemical reactions. You need one chemical to unlock the next. So you mustn't just throw them in and hope for the best. There is a logic to the order in which they go in. And you know, you'll notice that we did the cumin right at the beginning, just because they take a different length of time to cook, and what they offer is different to perhaps what some of the other foods. I'm just going to add a little more oil. Make sure that keeps going. And then I'm going to chop my tomatoes, because those I haven't done already in advance. And we do need a few of those. Now, if you haven't got fresh tomatoes, that's absolutely fine. You know, you can use tin stuff where you need to. It's really okay. Some people, we're not big fans of fresh of chopped tomatoes in this house, and just because I don't think they have as good a flavour. But if you don't have fresh tomatoes, you know, it's fine. Use chopped tomatoes. Same with the kidney beans. I cheated on kidney beans this morning because I didn't have time to soak them overnight. Any questions so far from anyone? I can't see the chat box. If there's any comments in there that I need to know or hear of, I'm happy to do that. I'm just letting the the onions and the spices mix in here. If you can see that, just letting those onions soften. It is really important that you let the onions soften and ideally go brown. You don't need to get them too brown, but you definitely need to soften them, because if they're uncooked, yeah, you don't want to eat uncooked onions. It's not good for you, and it really doesn't add to the flavours. So make sure. And you know, I'm going to spill the milk in here. I'm just over bloody.
You're doing great, Pav. You're doing great.
I'm not worried about the milk. It's more that I clean the cooker, I clean the hob, and I'm going to have to clean it again. That's no, they won't like cooking. So what's happened here? You can start. I don't know if you can. So you know, every time people send messages, they come up in a box, and so it hides the camera. So what we can see here is now that you know the China grass has become sort of milky and it's starting to solidify a little bit. It's getting thicker in texture. And at this point, now some people, I'm going to add a couple of drops of vanilla essence. Some people choose not to, and that's absolutely fine. You know, my mum wouldn't use vanilla essence. She'd probably use Cara water, which is like a rose water. It just gives a little perfumed sense to the dish. But some people don't use any at all. So it's really a question of yourself as to what tastes you have, as to what you do. I'm just going to stir that a little more. I'm just going to let that keep cooking on it's on a medium heat now, so it's not too high. I'm going to go back to the main course, which is the onions. It's just nicely browning and sauteing now with the spices, and that's great. Just going to chop the tomatoes very, very quickly. I will add the garlic and the ginger now to the pan. So we put the spices in, we put the garlic and ginger in. What remains now is the tomatoes and the kidney beans themselves. It's relatively straightforward. So I'm just going to get a knife and chop the tomatoes. Any questions, anybody?
Is it China grass or China glass?
Grass, Grass, as in green grass, because of the seaweed. And I think it's commonly found, well, given the Malay connection, it's found in the South China Sea, and because it's a seaweed, so it's a dried seaweed. And so that's where the name comes from, China grass. Any other questions, anyone?
Just one question, Pav.
Yes.
When can we all come round for dinner?
We've been saying this for 2 years. Once lockdown finishes, I promise. Oh, we're not in lockdown anymore, are we? Well, it feels like we're still in lockdown, at least in our house.
That's why it's teaching us to make it, Kev. You can make it yourself.
That's a different kind of fun.
That's true.
I have to say, I really enjoy it. And I think cooking for others is much more fun than cooking for yourself. So, and I think, just from an NHS point of view, just given the year or two that we've had, there's something really important about just taking downtime and looking after yourself. And fresh food, fresh vegetables makes a huge difference to, your health and well-being, but also, and being able to share food with colleagues. And it's not a great day today, but in terms of sharing some of the conversation about stories and so forth, that stuff really helps lift us and support one another. I think that is also as much as what this is about. And we are obviously, I shouldn't look at the camera and while chopping with a sharp knife. We are in the middle of LGBT History Month, of course, and we've started at the start of, and the session is partly around that. But it's not just about the hard politics, if you like, of the welfare, that sort of stuff. That stuff matters, of course. Workplace rights, of course, matter. But there's also something about just allowing LGBT people to be, to recognise their histories and how complex and challenging some of those histories have been. And we bring some of that trauma with us into the world that we live in. I mean, I was describing earlier about inequality in the southern states of the United States, which inspired some of the cooking today. What's really interesting is, I am now just going to take my tomatoes, which I've chopped, and I'm going to pop them into the main dish, which I'm just going to bring the camera over so you can see So you've got so in here you've got this is the base of the. I hope everyone can see that. This is the base of your gravy now. You've got the onions and the spices, which we already know with the oil. I've added to that the tomatoes, and those tomatoes now is just going to sit here and saute in that mixture. I'm going to put the lid on, and I'm just going to turn the heat up a little bit and allow them to. I'm going to try and put the extractor fan on if possible. Doesn't kill it too much. Okay. So that's okay.
I think you're very right there, Pav. When we think about eating and dining as a social thing, but cooking as a social thing as well, is important. Cooking for other people and cooking with other people is a great pleasure.
It's something very curious about how in the women's movements in the United States in particular, and the food I was describing earlier, the kitchen and cooking was almost reclaimed by women and the lesbian movement as an expression, because that was their space, and so they made it their own space. And there's the notion that sort of, we talk about food which is an aphrodisiac, like oysters, whatever, etc., etc. But the notion that food, in effect, is quite a sexual experience. It's about bringing people together. It's about enjoying pleasure and so forth. And when that narrative was constructed, particularly in literature, around lesbianism or hidden lesbianism and codified, it was codified through food, and the experience of food described sometimes quite sexual acts or acts of resistance in terms of being able to enjoy other fruits or to taste other fruits and so forth. That was quite a common literary tool that was used to communicate and convey important messages or build community in spaces that it wasn't always allowed to be in. It wasn't just, as I said earlier, it wasn't just racial segregation and subjugation, though that was really big and important. There's also oppression of many other minoritized communities as well, because and also I think there's something about food and power. One thing about the southern states is that southern states were often very, very poor, and the diet that they ate reflected that. So it was cornbread, cornmeal, flour. It was pork. It was really fatty. That matters to the communities that were living there, because for me, the more money you have, the better food you're able to afford. The poorer you are, the poorer the quality of food you have. And there's something about the inequalities within communities. So LGBT people, those who came out or dared to be out, or those who refused to marry, for example, just to try and fit in, were very much lower down the order in terms of social order. And often, if you were effeminate or perceived to be butch as a lesbian or effeminate as a man, you were very much othered and isolated, and that was then reflected in terms of how you were treating what outcomes you've had in your lives and so forth. What I've done, while we were speaking, I have put the china grass into a bowl to let it set. I've purposefully not put too much in, just so that, and literally just put it in a bowl. And if you can see that, and that's going to set now. I'm just going to let it set for about 15 to 20 minutes, I'm hoping. And then what I'll do is I'll add some of the. I like the pistachio to that. What we're going to do, I'm just going to come back to the main course now, just because we need to move on with that. So the tomatoes and onions and spices are all cooking away in that pan. I'm now going to add a little salt and pepper. I'm posh and middle class, so I use Himalayan pink salt, but you could use any table salt or whatever you want. Okay, and a little pepper to garnish. Now, if you wanted to use garam masala, I don't have any garam masala, so I use the salt and pepper at this point. But if you had garam masala, you would use that at this point. I'm also going to chop a green chili. Green chili is really good for flavor. The red chili powder is good for heat. But the green chili really brings the flavor to the dish. So it's not, they're not the same, they don't have the same purpose or functionality. They have quite different functions. And literally I'm just going to chop a green chili. I keep the seeds in. I don't, some people take the seeds out, but I don't really understand why they do that, because it takes the flavour out. If you take, so I'm just stirring those in. There's a nice thick sauce now developing at the bottom of my pan. Here you can see. And so that's really going to be the base of this. Now, if you so wanted, you could, I mean, you can add, we'll add the kidney beans in a moment, but you can add, for example, potatoes. You can boil potatoes and add those to the dish as well, so you make it a kidney bean and potato curry if you so wish. I'm just going to put this over here. My morsel and pestle over. I'm just going to, I've got my morsel and pestle, and I'm just going to put some pistachio nuts in there in the morsel and pestle. And then I don't know if people still have morsel and pestles, but we do. Okay, so that's nice and easy. So just really simple morsel and pestle. Just chop the pistachios, and that will go on top of the as garnish on the china glass dessert. So this, the tomatoes, onion, and spices nicely sort of you know, turn into a big thick gravy down here at the bottom. What I'm going to do is we're just going to add now the red kidney beans. Pop that all in. And give it a stir. Let me just rinse my hands. Any questions, anybody?
Pav, I was just asking about the kidney beans. So have you pre-cooked those, or are they?
No, so what I've done, I'll just show you the pan first. So I've popped the kidney beans in. It's like a gumbo style sauce, because it's quite southern style, so it's a bit more gelatinous than it would ordinarily be in properly Indian style. On the kidney beans, Emma, I said earlier that you can soak them, if you've got dry kidney beans, they're the best. Soak them for 5 to 6 hours overnight is fine, and then drain them and so forth. I've cheated today. I didn't have time, and it's been lazy. So I've used 2.5 tins of tin kidney beans, and they're absolutely fine. I've kept the juice just because I think it adds to the gravy and it adds a little bit of flavour. But God knows what they put in there in terms of the tin people. So, so you know, it depends on how many E numbers you're tolerant to or not. I have no idea what they put in, but
all about the cheats in my house. That's good.
Okay. So so yeah, cooking them from dry is always better, and they do plump up, and also they're a lot easier to digest. I think when they're made from dry, rather than the tin stuff. I don't know what they put in the tin stuff, but anyway, we're eating it today. So I'll leave that here now to cook. We're actually ahead of time, so I kind of, my little prep work and cheating kind of has done me favors. I can have a cup of tea and answer any questions. Let me see. Are there any questions so far? Any from anyone?
Yeah, you can show us how to make desi tea.
Desi chai. Okay, so that requires desi chai is that easy to do as well. So if you want to learn about tea, we've got a bit of time, so I may as well. Okay, let me do tea for you. So I'm going to use a small pan for my tea. I'll bring the thing over here. Water. We need water first. So if you ever buy things called like karak chai or desi chai, desi just means Indian or from the homemade stuff. That's relatively straightforward as well. What you need to do is boil the water, and then you can. I need some herbs and spices. Let me just pull a dish out now. I'll show you what herbs and spices we're going to use. So we'll have some cardamom. I've got green cardamom here. I've used about 4 pods of green cardamom. 5. I've got some fresh tea. So we'll take some of that out, put that in here. I'll show you the plates in a moment. And then, oh gosh, I don't even know what it's called in English. So I'd love to tell you, but I don't know what it's called. I'll put some.
What was the spice?
Sorry?
What was the spice, Pav?
I don't know what it's called.
What's it called in your...
I don't even know what it's called in my own language.
Show me. Oh.
I will ask my mum and I will let you know.
Yeah, what that is.
And then I guess we'll put some tea bags in. I've got PG, but you're welcome to choose any other you want. With the cardamom pods, I always press them. If they're too hard to do in your hand, then just use the back of a knife and flatten them, because when you flatten them, you get the flavour out. So you're going to get that. I'm going to press. And you know it's broken. So basically, we're just trying to open up the because inside there's some beautiful little seeds, and they give a beautiful, strong, pungent flavour, which is really nice. So I'm letting the water boil at the back. I'm just pressing my cardamom pods, opening those up.
Just to say, you don't need to put all these spices in, do you, Pav? It's
No,
all...
you don't. Well, you wanted desi chai, so I'm showing you desi chai.
Yeah.
and you, of course, the variations you use is up to you with that, but you need to have cardamom in it for sure. if there's no spices in it, it's practically English tea, and so this is what distinguishes Asian tea from English tea, I suppose. So I'm letting the water boil at the back. I've got my so on my plate, what I've got is I've got some cinnamon. I don't know if you can see this. I've got some cinnamon. I've got tea bags. I've got green tea there, which is dried home tea that we've bought from Asia. A little bit of that because it gives it a little strong kick. I've got cardamom pods in here. Those are the spices I'm choosing to put in. Some people put in who like choosing cardamom pods and so forth, and more ingredients, but we're quite comfortable with that here. Okay. I'll bring you back to the main dish that we were actually cooking, which I've forgotten about, which is now boiling away in here, simmering away in this pan here. So the kidney beans you can see there's a rich gravy there. That's really, and that will, I think when it cools down, the beans start soaking that up. It's because we haven't cooked the beans overnight. They're not as bloated as they ought to be yet. So that will come with a bit more time. Okay. I'll just check on the. So the China grass is also just setting away. And the red kidney beans you serve with either boiled rice, plain rice, and turn it into cups and then turn it out, and that's one way of doing it. The other way is, of course, naan bread or something like that to serve it alongside. But those are the two sort of principal ways in which you can you probably eat it. The water is boiling for the tea, so I'm just going to put the tea bags in, and then I'm going to add the spices to those. Mixture, and then China grass at the back. I'll use China grass. So the China grass has started. I don't know if you can see that. China grass has started setting. So what I'm going to do is, while it's setting, I'm just going to sprinkle some of my chopped pistachio nuts on top. And normally you'd leave this for about an hour or so, I'm obviously not having, I don't have that much time, so I'm trying to dry it a little bit, get it solid out here, but I then put it in the fridge and let it really properly set. And then what we do with this is that we would probably realistically, once it's properly set, is we then put it in the fridge for the remainder of time, and then we would slice it and square it or triangulate it, or make diamond shapes out of it, and then you scoop the pieces out and you put them on a dish. I'm hoping that I'm just going to pop this in the fridge for a short while. I'm going to try and do some of that while we're here, in between making my tea and cooking you, not you, me, a main dish as well. So 1 second. Any questions, anyone? You've been very quiet and very disciplined. Is anyone doing anything, anything specific for LGBT History Month? Are you all at LSCft, or are you from other trusts as well?
I'm from NWAS, as you know.
Yes. Okay.
Thanks for the invite, and fascinating session and very insightful. I just had a foodie question before I answer the other bit. So if you're not able to obtain the China grass element, what would you suggest as a substitute? Could you use vermicelli? Could you use something else?
Yeah. So the China grass comes in, it also has, so the name is agar agar, which is a Malay word for militia, peninsula. And that comes in powder form. So it's like a gelatine or a jelly. And so it comes in packets. It's actually very readily available. The China grass, the proper China grass that I showed you, not as accessible. You'll definitely find it in Chinese food stores, and you'll find it in most South Asian food stores. But the agar agar is much more common. It's called agar, and it's literally in packet forms. It's like this pack of kind of little packets. So it comes in that powdered form. And thinking that it's any old gelatine will do, I guess, if you have to have if you need to find a substitute. But it's dead easy to make. It's and I've kept it very simple. I've kept it plain white today, but you can do multicolors with it. So one of the things that when we were children, my mum used to give us great big trays, big rounded trays, and then we would do almost like little pipette exercises with colors, and we kind of make. It's quite a fun game. It's not a game, but it's a fun exercise with children as well. It's quite quick to make, and then you get the children to do drop the food coloring in that they want, and you create the patterns that you want and so forth. And because it sets quite quickly and it's edible, it makes it really a fun and easy thing to make with children. And also, if they don't like drinking milk, well, it's a good way of making them drink calcium. So it has some nutritional benefits too for them. So that's what I say is look for it in powder form as agar agar, which is, I saw it in Sainsbury's a few days ago, so it's much more common than the China grass of itself. Okay.
Super, thank you. And in answer to your other question, which is about what we're getting after, not as heavy as the fantastic work that yourselves have promoted. So hence why I'm on observing and in sponge mode, so to speak. But our team have committed to. We've created some staff profile stories to share out by the social channels and internal comms. I'm not sure whether or not we discussed this last time when we did our collaboration meeting across Lancashire and Cumbria, but our community calendar, which we enhanced this year, February, is very much about the LGBT staff network and a story profile from the chair, etc. So it is very much front and centre in terms of the work that we're doing.
Great stuff. It's good to hear. It's important that we keep sharing and raising the profile of LGBT staff and their experiences, because there are, of course, huge inequalities in terms of how LGBT patients experience services that we provide. I mean, we know that 1 in 5 don't declare their sexual orientation when they're accessing services, and that can have an impact on what kind of package of care we build for our service users. But quite worryingly for me, and particularly in the COVID context, 1 in 7 1 in 7 LGBT people said that they avoided using services because of fear of prejudice and discrimination. So, and we know in the COVID context, where in particular, that there's some of the highest levels of suicide or mental ill health were among LGBT people, it becomes even more, incumbent on us to try and do what we can to eliminate barriers and on LGBT people using services, but also for our staff. When there's some quite shocking data around, in our own trust, if you're an LGBT man, in particular, white gay man, you're 2.6 times more likely to be physically assaulted than someone who's not LGBT, white male, and that's really quite a shocking statistic. And we only really discover that when you dig through the data. You suddenly discover what the data is really telling you, and that's really quite terrifying. So it is such an important issue to keep on the agenda, on the inclusion agenda, as well as race and disability and race and gender and so forth. But it is a really important issue. So thank you for the work that you're doing at North West Ambulance Service. Thank you. Any other questions, anyone? Or any inquiries? You please know the tea is almost ready. What I've done to the tea is having literally cooked the spices, the cardamom, cinnamon, tea bags. And I've added some sugar in that because I like sugar in my tea. I've cooked that in the hot water, and then I've added some milk to it. And we're going to now let that cook again. We're going to let it boil, and then take it down, and then bring it up, and then take it down, and so forth. The red kidney bean curry is now ready. As you can see that in here. So that's ready here. As I say, I would probably serve that with rice or naan or something along those lines. The China grass dessert is sitting in the fridge now. We're hoping that will be able to come out in a moment. I'll just go and check on it. Okay, it's setting nicely, just needs a moment or two longer. And are there any more questions from anybody? Anything that I said that didn't make sense? Anything that I should say more about? Some people have had to leave, that's no problems. Any more comments? Nope. Okay, well, there's a whole programme of other activities as well over the LGBT History Month. A huge thanks to Becky. I think Becky's online. Becky's our co-chair of the LGBT network, and to Joe, who's our policy officer who leads on LGBT policy at the Trust, for the fantastic work that they've done, and being really pleased to support them in that work. We've got a session with Stonewall lined up. Nancy Kelly, who's the chief executive of Stonewall, so she's coming to us later this month. We've got a book club which Kevin is leading on, which is fantastic, and it's Transition Baby is the book. Is that right, Kevin?
It's called Detransition Baby. It's by Tori Peters. I'm about a third of the way through it, and it is hilarious and sad and very thought-provoking and thoughtful on a whole host of LGBT and race and feminist topics. And I'm loving it so far. So I highly recommend it, and I hope you'll all come along and talk to me about it.
So we've got, with the book club, we've got an evening, haven't we, Kevin? I think it's the 14th.
It's the 24th. It's a Thursday night, 7 o'clock. Again, it's a Teams thing, and I'm also looking at still trying to put together a list of interesting recommended books on LGBT etc. themes as well, which I will sort of circulate amongst people.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So we've also got a couple of LGBT mental health sessions, one with Lanx LGBT, which is a community organisation that we partner with. We've got a second one which is looking at what is it that our staff need in terms of training and needs, and that's open to both LGBT staff but also non-LGBT people. So what do team managers feel that they need to equip their teams to be better aware of LGBT issues and how to create more inclusive services? but also how do we create inclusive services for our staff and our fellow colleagues. So those are some of what we'll do with Lancashire LGBT. We've got a fantastic session lined up with UCLan and UK Black Pride, and we'll be looking at their issues around online violence, digital violence for LGBT people in digital spaces. We'll be looking at hidden histories of lesbians in the UK. That's one, we've got a brilliant professor she's going to talk about that. We'll talk a little bit about Black LGBT history, Black LGBT health. So what are the challenges facing non-white LGBT people in the UK in terms of accessing services and so forth. We've got a session lined up. We've got a new Pride Progress flag, of course, that we're adopting here at the Trust. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. And we're going to be doing, if you're a member of the LGBT network, which I hope you all are, we will be doing picnic packs that we're sending to every single person in the network. So we'll be doing an online session because we can't meet together. You'll be sent a picnic pack, and if you've not eaten it by the time the session's on, we'll sit and eat our picnic together, and we'll do a bit of we've got a few speeches and so forth, and a bit of experience sharing in that session. And there are a cluster of other things. We've got a couple of talks that we're supporting NHS Northwest with. Morecambe Bay colleagues have got a tweet chat about mental health, LGBT people. That's coming up in a couple of days' time. We've got, goodness, there's a number of other things too. I'm sure I've missed a few, but that should hopefully keep us busy for a while. My tea is ready. It's now boiling away, and what I'm doing is, sorry, you're just seeing steam. I bring it up to the boil and I let it go down over and over again. I'm not having, it's not wine, it's apple juice. Just in case I think I've turned alcoholic, I haven't. Do drink. The kidney bean curry is done. The China grass dessert is in the fridge, cooling down, just waiting for that to solidify, and we'll try and take that out. Otherwise, it'll be a hot mess if I take it out too soon. And we're practically there. And any final questions from anyone? Nope. Okay. Well, in that case, I'm going to let you go 5 minutes early, if that's okay. I don't think the thing hasn't set yet, so I'm not going to try and thrash it, otherwise it will just go everywhere if it's not hard enough. And I'm going to go have a cup of tea, I think. Thank you very much for coming. Look out for other programs or sessions that we're running over the course of the month, and we'll hopefully see you at some of those. Okay.
Pav,
Yes.
could you just hold the tea up, because I got a screenshot of everything else you were doing, but just get a nice one of the tea, please.
Okay. Does that help?
It was better in the shade.
Okay,
Come back.
Goodness me.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. I'll take screenshots for you and send them to you. Thank you all. Take care. See you soon.
Pav, thank you. It was brilliant.
You're welcome. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Pav, as always. Great.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.